Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of SportTechie Live. Happy 2021. This session is baseball's tech-driven future of performance, and we've got maybe our record-breaking size panel with a lot of good things to discuss here. I'm going to go through the roster here. We've got Dr. Mike Sun, the VP of Research and Innovation at ProPlay AI, which is capturing biomechanics purely with a smartphone. We've got Colin McGowan, the managing director at Baseball Report, which has partnerships throughout the industry. In fact, we have so many interweaving partnerships here. I'll probably spare them at the top, as we've got a video here that's going to make some of this pretty clear in a minute. We've got Casey Mulholland, the founder and lead developer of Kinetic Pro Performance in Tampa, Florida. We've got Dean Jackson, pitching coordinator at Driveline Baseball, and the one that actually gets to use all these tools, Nate Pearson, the Toronto Blue Jays top pitching prospect, a 2017 first-round pick who made his major league debut last year, but he also is a founding member of ProPlay AI and works out at Kinetic Pro Performance. So just to give you a sense as to the way everybody's connected here. And without further ado, we've got two very new, awesome products hitting the market. ProPlay AI is having its grand launch, and Kinetic Pro Performance has its smart resistance bands that can guide training. We've got some videos here to queue up and let you know a lot more about it in better detail than I can provide. So let's hit play.
It took me a little bit to mature into my body and to figure some things out, and it took me those 2 years in college in order to get that velo and everything. And I think if I had ProPlay AI back then, I feel like it would have just sped up the process in order to learn my mechanics better and understand what parts move and why they move, and the product of those parts all moving together in sync. Obviously, it's way easier. You don't need a $25,000 biomechanics lab. You just need an app. Everyone has an iPhone nowadays. You can have it in your pocket and jump on the mound and take some quick videos, and all of a sudden you'll have some data on it. And I think that's what's revolutionary about this app, and it's going to really change the game. I have used a $25,000 biomechanics lab before, and with ProPlay AI, you can just video yourself from the side and just still put a digital skeleton on you, and you'll just get the data that way. It's a lot easier. That's what's so great that we're able to do, put it in an app and make it affordable for colleges and coaches, so these young players can get access to it.
All right. That should give everyone a little bit more of a background as to what's new and what's the latest and greatest in baseball technology. And before we get into the conversation, just want to say hello to all the audience members who, if this is your first time joining one of our sessions, we encourage you to use the chat function on the right-hand side to say hello and introduce yourself. The questions tab, I'll be checking regularly, and we'll try to work in as many as possible. And we'll go from there. Let's start by living in the space of these new gadgets. And so going over to Mike to kick us off here, take us a little bit through what ProPlay AI set out to do, how quickly this came together, and what you see as its future.
Thanks, Joe. I think on our intro, we missed that probably PBR scouted Nate at one point in time, and he's also been to Driveline. So he's kind of the glue that brings everybody together here. So ProPlay AI, we've been around for a little bit over a year now. And our goal has always been to just be able to bring biomechanics data to the palm of your hand in the most accurate and efficient way possible. And, over the past 12 months, starting back at the winter meetings in San Diego and starting to work with Casey, starting to work with Nate, and then eventually bringing, our data into Driveline's track system. We've been providing that data quite frequently over the past 6 months, and then started working with PBR also. And we're trying to, expand out of just the track system to collect your data with the Pitch AI app, which we're going to be launching this month.
Mm-hmm. Great. And over to Casey, I know you met Mike at back when people were allowed to meet in one place at the San Diego winter meetings. Give us a little summary as to what you saw that day, where you saw it, which I think speaks well to the accessibility of it, and why you have joined as an advisor and believe in the product.
Yeah, so met Mike through Ben Hansen and the Modus team. We were in the Tech Summit together, and Mike said, hey, casually, I got this thing I want to show you. And so we walked out to the back porch of the convention center, and Mike said, hey, just give me a pitch. I was in khaki pants and a polo and gave my best rendition of a decent spot. And he showed me the skeleton that the app was able to create. At the time, it was obviously being worked on, things were growing, but the ramifications of what that would be in baseball is obviously unparalleled. So since then, we've been working together pretty heavily, trying to beta the product and grow it and provide good research and feedback. And it's just an amazing, ease of use product for day-to-day training. So.
Mm-hmm. And Dean, Driveline's obviously established itself as one of these major leaders, in this space. And I know ProPlay AI has been sort of incorporated into track, but from your vantage point in testing it, seeing how accurate it is, what features stand out to you?
The big ones for us, really my job was to figure out how can we leverage the tech to be better and more efficient at what our trainers do. So that was the big question that I had to answer, because nobody wants to use it if it takes more time or doesn't give you as accurate information, right? So there are a few metrics that we were really able to use. Pelvis positioning, torso positioning, just degrees over the whole throw was significantly better. We did some testing of basically just showing some pictures to our trainers and said, where do you think the pelvis and where do you think the torso is? And then where does Pitch AI think it is? And then where is it actually from the mocap lab? So there's been a few things like that where we've been able to just drastically improve the accuracy of our trainers. Now, it's important to note, not everything on it is absolutely 100% great, which Casey had said it's getting there and it will continue to get better, but there are things that are great that allow it to just improve the training quality, improve the information given to the trainers and to the trainees. So if you really hone in on those, that's the huge value there.
Mm-hmm. No, I think when I had a chance to write a story about this a few months ago, I think Mike kind of said it best. This is biomechanics in the wild. It's kind of that bridge between, your state-of-the-art, Kinetrax or Simi system in a ballpark, or your enterprise, lab at a place like Driveline. And then so over to Nate, you're the one whose skeleton is getting rendered up there. You're the one who's seeing whether how your mechanics are actually working. How often do you use this in a training session? Are there any particular insights that have stood out to you?
Yeah, man, I try to use it every time I'm on the mound, just to get some sort of feedback or just basic data moving on through the off season, so you can see the progression of where we want to be, where we're at, how far away are we. And I also use it a bunch in season, this past season in Buffalo, and also at the alternate site in Rochester. So it's obviously with your phone, so you can take the video wherever. And so it's very, very user friendly.
Mm-hmm. And I know that Blue Jays are one of the ones that have signed on as a client. Have you seen the organization start to use it as well around you, or is it so far has it mainly been on your own initiative?
I mean, there's definitely starting to use it. I know they sent some data to Mike while I was at the alternate site, and I didn't even know that they were using it, but they used a video of me while I was at the alternate site throwing and sent it to him, and he sent it to me, and so we were all talking about it. So it's they're definitely starting to use it more and more.
Mm-hmm. And Colin, I know NASCAR has partnered with ProPlay AI and wants to use the technology as well. What do you see as its future in the amateur landscape?
Yeah, for us, when we evaluate technology, we always look at the efficiency and capture process for our events. So it really checked all the boxes. When you come to a PBR event, this is something we can capture and are confident in the data. But also it extends outside of our events, and we're able to give it to our scouts to take it to games and to use it outside. So it really crosses the boundaries of what our core product is, but it really allows us to take the data elsewhere. And also what stood out with the conversations with Mike is that they're truly committed to getting data, reports, and insights to the player, and they're less worried about the business, but they really want this data to be in the hands of players across the world.
Mm-hmm. Great. We've got a lot more that we want to get to on that too, but let's talk about the KP bands for a second here. Casey, what was the need that you were trying to address here? And what should the average, I know in our audience, whether it's pro and amateur, we've got a lot of folks who are running baseball facilities, coaching players. What should they be looking for from this new product?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we started on the process, and something that I founded Kinetic Pro on was the concepts of workload management. Right now, we have a dynamic band program that is able to assess musculature in the shoulder and determine a dynamic exercise list. So daily athletes are able to not just have this static plaque of exercises, so to speak. We need to be able to provide specific insights to individual athletes and keep your band program dynamic through the day-to-day training process. I think it's just a really untouched market, but we've been able to combine this and start to do some research with other workload management principles surrounding throwing specifically. So we see, athletes' fitness level building over the off season. We also see some correlations in our data, and so over the next couple of months, that's something we're going to continue to dive deeper into, do some further research on, and we really hope to see this product take off from both side of things on a day-to-day basis from resistance band training, but also get much deeper into the actual workload management components of the athlete's day-to-day training, specifically with pitchers. So.
Mm-hmm. And Nate, you're the one who's down there working out of that facility all the time. Give us your Yelp review. Give us your little early feedback as to how it's helped you so far.
Yeah, no, definitely the new bands are revolutionary. Just to be able to test right when you get in there, the first thing you do, and you get to feel how your body's feeling, how your arm's feeling, and it gives you a score. And then you go and get your work in, whatever you have for that day, and you come back to the bands, and it gives you a whole arm care basically routine and everything. And the app on there it's so easy to follow. The videos load I was able to do it my first time using it without asking Casey questions or anything. So it's very, very cool. It's very very quick too. It's very user friendly, which is, for me, that's very big.
Mm-hmm. So we start collecting all of these different data sources, and none of these tech devices really talk to each other at this point. How do we start to make sense of everything? You can get feedback from biomechanics of your pitching motion. You can get feedback from your resistance band program. how do they blend together, and where do you go from there? I think, Dean, you're probably best situated to, with all the different tech that you've got at Driveline.
Sure.
What should everyone know on how to proceed with all these different sources and what should come about?
Sure. Yeah, that's the that's the whole idea behind Track, right? Is that you have all this really good information that you're collecting in a bunch of different places, and it's really important to have it all be a paired data set altogether that you can work with. So that's the point of Track, is to be able to throw everything into there. Whatever data you are collecting, get into one place under one roof, so you can manipulate it from there and kind of find trends and actually work with the data from that point. So yeah, just wrapping that whole thing up, Track is that's the point. How's the data?
Mm-hmm. And Casey, I know you have a project in this space as well. What can you share at this point?
Yeah, so we're a couple months away still, but we're trying to design the first dynamic model within the baseball industry for player development. So what we really want to do is we want to create something that uses forecasting to basically use AI to create forecasting for player development. We have limitations as coaches, meaning that as a coach, as a human being, I can't recall every athlete that walks through my door's data from the last let's say 10 assessments or the last couple months. We want to use this historical data that we collect on athletes, whether it be our band program or the data we collect in the weight room via BBT, or if we're looking at pitch design metrics. We want to take all this data, put it into one space, create a scoring value, identify athletes' day-to-day training, and kind of a scoreboard function. We want to be able to create a much more objective value for athletes to work off of, to understand their limitations and then make recommendations to them based upon those limitations, to help coaches assist them the day-to-day in the training space, but also help athletes understand where they need to go to potentially achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm. When you say scoreboard function, it's not like anyone's competitive in this industry, right? It's not like anyone needs a goal to work toward. And so, Colin, obviously PBR is similarly stretched out with tentacles in a lot of different spaces, working with a lot of companies. What is the, how do you, sort of collate it all and bring it together into your reports?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear all the boundaries that these guys are pushing, and we're really just an integration partner, which is why we work so well with them, in that we're trying to create the best, take their technology downstream as to capture. So you come to a PBR event, you get your biomechanics assessment, you get a Driveline snapshot, and go talk to Driveline. They're the smart guys who can tell you how to get better. We just collect the data and say, here's what you are on this date, and go talk to our partners as to how to get better. So we're very focused on collecting information and also doing what we do well, which is writing scouting reports and the human element for the players. So we're the opposite of a lot of these companies where we have very little tech, but we're based on integrating the human and the technology is really what we strive to do.
Yeah, for sure. We're starting to get some good questions coming in. Kind of to this point that we're talking about of integrating technologies. Stephen Rosen asks, you have technologies measuring biomechanics. Is there a way to capture the results of the pitch, the velocity, trajectory, location, everything that you're going to get from your TrackMan, Hawkeye, Rapsodo, et cetera, et cetera? How do you start pairing and combining those two? Anyone want to jump in with an answer here?
I can start off there. From a very technical side of things, I know a lot of what tech companies are doing now are building APIs, so it does become easier to integrate all of your data into one place. And that's what Track is doing. That's what Casey's been doing. Casey didn't have APIs. He had his own fingers, and you should see some of his spreadsheets. As a real spreadsheet nerd myself, I was pretty impressed with some of the work he'd done. But yeah, those things, those platforms like Track, any platform where you're bringing all your data into one place, that's definitely what's started happening.
Actually, we got another question specifically for you, Mike. What's the timeline for hitting mechanics on ProPlay AI, and is Nate trying to prevent hitters from getting any advantage they can?
Yeah, that is something that's come up frequently. You know, I've primarily been a researcher in the space of pitching, so I've been hesitant to get into the hitting world. But we are starting on hitting mechanics now. We've got some exciting partners that I'm not sure are publicly available to discuss quite yet, but I think within the first half of this year, you'll see some hitting mechanics coming out from us.
Mm-hmm. Starting with you on this one, Dean, how do you know if a coach is kind of new to this space, you know, what advice do you give to, you know, how do you collect and interpret the data? Like, how much data do you think you need until you start making changes? You know, are there any tips? Obviously, I know this is going to vary tremendously device to device and so forth, but as generally as you can, how would you guide someone who's new to this space?
And that's a really good question, because I mean, there's a lot of people in that boat these days, right? As new tech comes out, it's kind of hard to keep up with all of it. So my best suggestion is whatever makes sense to you, implement it just from a collection standpoint. So get it out there. If you think that this data could be really valuable, go ahead and set it up with your team and start collecting. And as you're collecting, find people to learn from. So I know just because this is where I work, I know at Driveline we've got a lot of educational tools. So once you've collected all this data, you can get some tools from us on the education side and start to learn exactly how do we do with it? How do we take this data and use it to change the athlete in a really meaningful way? Because that's really the goal. You don't just want to collect the data and not do anything with it, and you don't want to collect it and not be able to make meaningful changes. So that's really my best advice. Is there's so much data, it's extremely hard, and start collecting. Just kind of get this picture of what's really important. What do you think is important? Start collecting that data, learn how to implement it. It's going to be a long process, not going to be a very quick thing, but definitely find people who do work in the area that you're interested in as far as implementing it, because everything, exactly like you said, everything is going to be slightly different in terms of, are we talking like implementing Rapsodo data, implementing motion capture data, implementing like a dynamic throwing program. All those are going to be a little bit different. So that's as broad as I can get. I hope I answered it. Yeah,
for sure. And so Nate, from the player perspective, you know, you're not going to want to pour into these spreadsheets, most likely. I know some players do. But, you know, if I'm not mistaken, I think you've used, you know, not only ProPlay AI, but you've used, you know, Rapsodo and Modus. What do you want to gain from that? Well, what's helpful to you, and what do you want your coach to present to you this, so that you're able to make a good change without being overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I never wanted to be overwhelmed, so I was always cautious about what I was diving into. And the first thing I really dove into was the Rapsodo and learning everything about that, and finding the balance between that. But it's for players, it's all about not getting overwhelmed, not diving too deep into it, and picking out every little thing that's in your routine, because it's all about progressing and getting better, not just totally changing your whole dynamic as a pitcher. You know, there's so many different resources out there, but it's about finding the few that really work for you and focusing on those. And that's kind of what I've done, and it kind of is what got me here where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's my own echo. Sorry. So Colin, I think you're going to probably, you know, PBR is probably meeting a lot of young parents who are excited about, you know, giving their son or daughter the best chance to advance in the sport, but again, it's probably pretty new to it. Well, what advice does PBR usually give as people are entering the space?
Yeah, I think we're an entry point to a lot of the technology, and just kind of helping a player understand where they are. Are they ready for college baseball? That's really where our bread and butter is. We're not Nate isn't our target market. We're trying to get a local kid to a Division II down the street. Everyone's going to be able to know that Nate is a fantastic prospect just if you go see him one time. But we're trying to really help the fringe prospects find a home in college. So I think for us, it's where do you stack as a baseball player, and the technology is hopefully useful for that, but it's also getting advice from our scouts and kind of who to go talk to. So you can come to a PBR event get your TrackMan, your blast data, your driveline snapshot, but take that to your coach and see, do they agree? Like what do you see with the data? Does this line up with your expectations? So it's really just our advice is to sample around and to take your data to those that know how to interpret it, and to read Driveline's blogs and Fangraph's blogs, because your spin rate's a fairly nuanced concept, but there's a lot of good information out there that you can help teach yourself.
And to stay with you for a sec, how do you vet which companies you're going to partner with? How do you decide which groups are providing enough value to the youngsters?
Yeah, I think it starts with the technology. Is this something that we can capture efficiently? Is really the starting point. And is the company aligned with our goals to distribute the data through our platforms, and can we help them add value to the athletes? Like we really want our athletes to further engage with Driveline and ProPlay AI without us involved. So I think it starts with the technology, their philosophies, but also there's a lot out there, and we really want to partner with good people. So we're a human company, and we really value the people at the end of the day. So that's a big piece of it for us.
Mm-hmm. We have another audience question from a longtime baseball strength coach, Gary McCoy. He asks, most tech neglects to tag changes in trends or fails to correlate an athlete's normalized mechanics to key performance indicators in the game. Does anyone employ chaos algorithms or an AI model that addresses bulk data? I think this is one that maybe we'll start with you, Casey.
Yeah, so that's kind of the long-term goal, right? Is we want to get more. So here's my thing with this is we have two different spaces in the game right now. We have coaches who we're asking to be physics experts or engineers in and of themselves, learn about, advanced principles here. And then we have, the guys that are quote unquote the nerds, the guys that are diving into this stuff and love this stuff and trying to build their own models and their own things. And I think we have to simplify this, and I'll turn this over to Mike after this to talk a little bit deeper into maybe some of the AI stuff. But I think we have to simplify this and utilize the AI, take the programming off the coach's plate, and pass the programming itself to computer learning and understanding that we can't recall the historical data that we're trying to constantly recall on a day-to-day basis. Computers are much that. So, building these models, understanding where this is going, talking to both groups. I think, from my role on a day-to-day basis in Kinetic Pro, we're trying to build something. We have an app coming out in a couple months, and our goal is to utilize that app as a V1, upgrade it to a V3 in the future, where we're actually making these recommendations, utilizing AI to simplify the coach's role. Back to what a coach should be, which is, the coach should be more relational on the field day to day with the player, not having to worry about intaking massive amounts of data and siphoning through that on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of my take on that. I'll turn it over to Mike to maybe talk a bit more of the engineering on AI, as he has more of a background in that space.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, like I think AI only becomes a really valuable tool if you have really high quality data. Like, I mean, you can get your something out of really fuzzy or messy data. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of these models are garbage in and garbage out, which is, a tale as old as time in computer science. If you have good data to start with, it becomes a lot easier to get into these computer vision models and these AI models. And, that's what Casey's trying to do. Back to, what's important and what to capture. Like, I bug Dean all the time on Slack because, like, I'm coming from a background with like a PhD in biomechanics, but there's not too many people in the world that have used motion capture data and used it to guide programming quite like Dean has or quite like Driveline has. And like for me and like my team of biomechanists, getting his input is huge. But then on top of like Dean, we have this kind of thing in baseball now where it's this old school versus new school people. Most of the time you end up seeing a lot of these anecdotes that coaches have they usually end up being true to some extent. So what we always want to do is get the feedback from the people who might not be traditional users of your data and figure out ways to make that data useful for them. You know, whether it's one key metric or it's one key application, it doesn't have to change overnight where all of a sudden you're filming every single bullpen somebody throws. But if you're trying to work on one thing and see if it gets better, you know, recording that type of motion capture data and then displaying it back to them, you can get that feedback. But if you don't kind of have that feedback loop in mind or that type of outcome in mind, I think, you know, you start relying on AI to find those trends for you, and the data can become very overwhelming very fast. So sometimes it just, you know, you take something extremely complicated, really try and distill it down, and then, you know, the AI component of it really doesn't become that much important if it's not useful to the coach at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Dean, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I think you made a great point talking about how it's created kind of a false dichotomy of like, do you use data or do you not? And it's not 100% or 0%. The whole point of collecting data is to make it actionable for the athlete. And if that's just making sure, hey, I don't think or I'm not quite sure he moved the way that I thought he moved, or I'm not quite sure that this pitch spun the way I thought it spun, and then just getting the feedback from that and then giving the normal feedback you would normally give to the athlete. It could be that, and it could also be relying heavily on it. It just depends totally on the coach and how they want to go about it. So I think that's a really important point, Mike, that you made, which is just using the tech to allow you to be a better coach. It's not just having the tech take over you as a coach.
Mm-hmm. And Casey kind of hinted at this at the beginning, and I know he's big on this dynamic model concept for the future of player development. You know, how does, you know, incorporating all these data sets, you know, change the pathway for a player's career? What, you know, from the player's point of view, you know, what could change in a few years as this becomes, you know, more mainstream?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been trying to figure out for, you know, about 3 years now in what we're doing. And so the concept here is that, you know, like I said before, coaches are being asked to be physics experts, and in reality, you know, we need to value number one, how educated, how quality is this coach in terms of making change and doing the things that we're asking them to do. But then from a player standpoint, what's the bottom line? You know, you go on Instagram, you go on Twitter, you go around and you see all of these videos popping up on players' news feeds daily. And, you know, we have our facility, and they come in daily with a new question. You know, should I try this back hip move, or should I try my glove side in this position? And they go through this list of things that they're working towards because they saw it the night before on social media. You know, goal setting, creating a process in which an athlete can understand simplicity and, you know, the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, in terms of their betterment and their development of an athlete is important, but it also has to be objective. So creating this dynamic model, this concept of taking historical data over time and trying to give athletes the best chance to see future growth doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to see that future growth, but we can put them on the best path. Not because it's my opinion or another coach's opinion, but because this is what we see as a community as a whole, to help that athlete get to where they want to go. We can gamify and objectify that process via a scoreboard and time, and help our community also push that athlete forward in understanding. And I think that's where you really hit the pinnacle of this in a few years here is, you know, we're taking all these tech pieces, which are just called and create this model independently, test this model independently, and understand all the variances, all the variables that are going into the day-to-day training process. You know, just because your velocity is down today, 2 miles an hour, doesn't mean that it was something you did wrong mechanically. It could have been the way you slept, you know, 4 nights before. If I put you up on a screen, I put 2 mechanical things side by side, 2 videos side by side. You know, the expectation that, you know, one was 93 and one was 90, and you break that down and find a way to, you know, tell yourself you need to do something different. It's so much deeper than that. But this technology is allowing us to see it. Now it's a matter of communicating it and making sure that we take the steps forward to, you know, helping athletes understand their growth path and the trajectory of that growth path in time.
Mm-hmm. So Nate, you know, say whether it's, you know, Casey or someone with the Blue Jays, someone comes to you and explains, hey, we've got all this data. We've you know, analyzed it. We think this is the best thing for you to do. Like, is that hard for a player to say to buy into something that a machine is spitting out at them? Would you rather trust that, a coach? I mean, what are the considerations that a player has to consider in adopting this?
Well, for me, I'd probably ask all the questions in the world if I was trying something new, or if I was stuck on something that I couldn't really figure out or whatever, and someone came to me and say, "Hey, man, I think you should try this. Like, this will be good for you. I think it will work." And then I'll just I'll get all the information I can about it, and if I choose to try it, then I'll try exactly how I want to do it half in. I do exactly what they say or whatever, if it's a coach or whatever, and I would try it out, and if it worked, then it worked, and I'd put that as part of my routine. But there's also things that you try out that don't work, and not everything's going to work for the same person or same pitcher. So it's all about figuring out what works for you, but also staying open-minded with all the different technologies, because something can be invented, just like Pro Play AI can help guys clean up their mechanics that have never been able to clean them up. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've been struggling with their mechanics for the longest time, and they just want to throw harder. And then Pro Play AI mixed in with everything else can help clean that up and just shorten that learning curve.
Mm-hmm. And so over to Dean, Nate's the only one in the big leagues at the moment, but certainly Dean pitched in the minors. From your perspective of having played, if this had existed even a few years ago when you were just starting out, what would have been your thought process, and how would you have gone through trying to decide what to implement?
Sure, and I've had kind of an interesting look at this whole thing, because I've got to do it while playing and be involved in the early stages of everything coming up, as well as trying to coach, being involved in the early stages of all the data coming up. So kind of how we approach things is step one is like we want to have a conversation and kind of a presentation from the coach to the athlete of, this is, let's say we're talking about the throw, how the throw works. This is what I deal with mostly. Presentation, this is how the throw works. This is how all these pieces, because it's really complicated, and we want to have a really good theoretical conversation. How does it work? Now, once we know how it works, then we can kind of analyze how the athlete actually moves. We can talk about how that is not taking full advantage of the system and how they could move a little bit better. And once we have this really good theoretical understanding, then it's about how can we apply that theoretical understanding to actual fields and what they can take out to playing. So, because that's the communication language of us is words and graphs and visuals and things like that. The communication language of the players is like visuals as well as feels. So that's how they express on the field. So what are they feeling? How does it feel when they move? So that's what we want to do. We want to take the theoretical, convert it into a feel, and how we can convert it into a feel is with feedback from these things like pitch AI. So for example, one of the biggest problems we have, or one of the biggest problems our athletes have at Driveline is rotating the pelvis at a specific point during the delivery, and we can get feedback on whether or not they're actually accomplishing that. Once we have this whole conversation, they understand what they're trying to do. We'll try a few different feels, and we'll get feedback from pitch AI to see, are they actually doing that? Did that feel work? Did it didn't? Or did it not? And obviously, it's not something that's just going to be like, this one throw, it worked great, it'll happen over time. But that feedback from pitch AI and from other pieces of data just allows you to determine, is this a avenue we should continue to pursue, or is it something we should probably just get rid of because it made you significantly worse? So that's really where I think all this value is just giving more information to the coaches and to the athlete, so they can have a much better conversation real time and really understand what's going on in terms of changes and have a much more directed path to get better.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, we're hearing about how wonderful pitch AI is. So we have a question here from Jim Nikopoulos. What are the key remaining inhibitors to get pitch AI out to the masses, including the grassroots level?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing with biomechanics right now is biomechanics is at where maybe pitch tracking was 3 years ago, right? Where people are hearing about spin rate and, they knew it's important, but they're not sure what to do with it. I think, Kinetic Pro is building out an educational component on mechanics and the kind of an online university, and Driveline's been doing that for years with a lot of really good content in there. That education piece, I think, figuring out ways to get more people to understand these biomechanical variables and how they're important Because like Dean was saying, right, there's going to be some stuff that works for some people and some that absolutely does not work. And those different cues or whatever they may be to help with player development, they're not going to be across the board useful, but it's still going to be useful to have that information and have that data there. So I think as people start to understand what is biomechanics, how is it important to player development, how is it important at the youngest age to, up to somebody like Nate, and then up to somebody who maybe is in the later part of their career, all that stuff is going to be really, really useful in taking down those kind of, I don't want to call them like stereotypes about the data or anything like that, but the more that people become comfortable with hearing the terms and knowing that these terms are important, I think once that's established, then, biomechanics ends up being the same as where we see spin rate or even a radar gun, at this point in time, within a fairly short period of time.
Mm-hmm. So another audience question kind of dovetails nicely. Brandon Barak asks, for Nate, in terms of these terms, like what are the terms and checkpoints? What are the metrics you monitor most closely in your pitch AI reports?
For me, there's a few different things. There's hip to shoulder separation, there's stride length, there's extension. I kind of just go through all those just to see, compared to where I was in season or and in the off season, and see, all right, this is where I was mid season. Like this is where everything's working, and this is where I am now. And you can see like the degrees or hip to shoulder separation. I'm always texting with Mike about different metrics, even on different pitchers compared to me or whatever. I think the other day you did Doc Holiday, and we compared mine to his, and it was like his was a little bit, his external rotation was not as good as mine, but like there's something else that he did in his extension that made up for it or something like that, which is pretty crazy. And so that's the kind of stuff I look at using Pitch AI, and just usually just marks in my training of my progression, or if I'm going the opposite way, so you can kind of always see the gradual progression.
Mm-hmm. And so Colin, when you're scouting reports how much are you biomechanics? How much does that become a part of your process? And if it's not already a big part, do you see it becoming one in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. If you mine our scouting reports, talking about how a player moves is key. We don't call it external rotation or torque, but just how spin rate or hop or rise, like I see a very similar progression as these metrics become more available. So we're in the capture process, and this February, athletes will have Pitch AI data available for college coaches on our platform, and reports that they can share with Driveline or their local coach. So we definitely see that our role is to help translate it, but it's really to lean on Dean and Mike and Casey to have those tools to how it should be communicated, because we can help with the capture and the platform to do that. But it's really just to educate the market and also our internal scouts on these are the same things, and here's how this tool can help make your evaluation more accurate, because a lot of the times the data in the scout will agree. So it's just to really translate and explain, this is what you were talking about last year without Pitch AI.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to add there, Joe, like some of these things that like Cullen's describing, that scouts have been describing for years, we're just trying to put a number to, what is a long arm action? What's a short arm action? What's an easy delivery or something like that? Any of these things you would have seen in a scouting report, we're just trying to put a number on it. I made a joke on Twitter a few weeks ago about people were talking about all these quantitative analysts being hired. Said the next big thing that's going to be happening is qualitative analysts being hired, right? How do we actually start identifying trends there? So it's, the two definitely feed off of each other, the scouts to the tech, and then the tech back to the scouts. And I think some of the tech can really help with getting somebody who's maybe a more junior scout up to speed to where an advanced scout may be a lot faster. And, improve the consistency of those reports.
Mm-hmm. Casey said something interesting to me the other day about how a lot of this will kind of change not only just what the coach's job is, but how they're evaluated. Why don't you share a little bit with our audience here what you meant by that and what you see as that future as a coaching report card?
Yeah, so right now, oftentimes coaches get hired upon relationships or, in some cases, what their Twitter looks like, right? These guys are putting out a lot of great content. They're, very in tuned and engaged in the landscape of baseball as it changes. But in reality, we need a way to quantify the change of player development and quantify the approach, the philosophy of the coaches and their implementation. So if we see, if we're able to objectively determine with some sort of scoring system the day-to-day training of an athlete, and what we'll be able to see is, let's say I have a player that goes through rookie ball and then goes to single A, and then every time he hits double dip and breaking pitches that we see across the board in our guys in double A, well, that may be grounds for me to have a discussion with the double A pitching coach and say, hey, why do you teach your breaking balls to your guys this way? And if we find that he's not fitting the organizational philosophy, or if we find that the philosophy is just not working across the organization, then we can go in and, number one, evaluate the way that we approach our philosophy. But then number two, we can also figure out where coaches are best suited. Some coaches are best suited at the higher levels where they're maybe more relational, AAA, big league coaches. Some coaches are more in the developmental space, which may be the rookie ball space. And so across the professional organizations, now we can kind of objectively determine placement for coaches, reasons for implementation of certain philosophies. And then once we get to the private space, when we look at, spaces like Kinetic Pro here in Tampa, we can start to look at, again, report cards and trying to figure out, again, where the best bang for the buck is for the athlete, and so their player development, having those real conversations with the athlete and say, hey, listen, we can give you drill work all day on the wall with plyo care throws or with throwing drills, but your weight room numbers are that's where you have to spend your time. Until we get there, we really can't really look somewhere else. But we can objectively determine at that point, this is where we need to put our energies and efforts from both the coaching standpoint and also the player standpoint.
Mm-hmm. We had a great question submitted even in advance of the session. Someone who runs a local baseball club, oftentimes budgets aren't the best, and so they're asking, what's the one technology that provides the most bang for the buck? Like if you're, a teenage club, not a lot of money, where do you start? I think, Dean, let's see what you have to say first.
Well, I think the biggest bang for your buck is a radar gun. And I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but that's the first one I started with when I was in college, and it opened up my world completely because then it allowed me to not only track progress from my velocity days, but also allowed me to monitor intensity on my lower days. So the next piece from that, I would say, would be like a Modus sleeve if you want to track stresses. But at that point, you start getting a little bit more complicated. So really, I think the bare bones, most basic, most biggest bang for your buck go from 0 to 1 piece of technology, I would say it'd be a radar gun.
Anyone else got something to throw out there?
Yeah, I would. For me, when I was in like high school and everything, the radar gun was huge because I always wanted to throw hard. And in high school, I didn't really throw the hardest. I was like mid 80s, and then by my senior year, I was 88, 89. But every outing I had my dad like radar gun me or whatever because he was into it too. And I feel like that, knowing where I was at each game, each time I was in a game, knowing where my velo was at, and I can see the slow incline, and it motivated me even more. Without having that, I would have no clue that I was getting better. I know I would be getting stronger, but and that kind of led me to get really into player development and to learn more about all this different stuff. And you can kind of just keep track of everything, and it's real more motivation more than anything to see that you're progressing.
I was going to add in there, like I was thinking about this a lot when you sent it out, Joe. In my opinion, probably the most important piece of technology you can have is a spreadsheet. Like, whether it's Google Sheets or Excel or something like that, but there's really not much more important than writing it down. There's something going around on social media about like what's doing drive line, and people thinking, oh, that just means throwing weighted baseballs. Like, no, it means writing down, it means tracking your data over time. And that's really, at the end of the day, like if you've got your radar gun, that's cool, but write it down so you can see how things change over time. Because watching your progression through data, I think is one of the most important things to make sure you're on that right path. And that's kind of how Casey started too, right? Like writing down every single throw. Write down every single throw, and then you get a really accurate idea of what workload is. And that would be my number one thing, get into the habit of writing stuff down.
Yeah, to piggyback off that too. I mean, Dean, you mentioned the Modus sleeve, and something that we've used for a while here, and partnered with Modus in the past. But it's one of those things, like workload management's so complex, and it's understanding at first, and simplifying that process. It really comes down to understanding the day-to-day training process, right? And Mike, to even further elaborate, if we look at just writing down what we do on a daily basis, it's going to tell us something. If you just take a pen and paper out and just write down, hey, I threw X amount today, I lifted X amount today, and I went about my process, and I plan to do this again. Consistency, the consistency for some athletes. When we look at technology, we got to find something that provides us consistency and progression. So we look at, the Modus sleeve, it objectively gives you consistency and progression, but a radar gun can do the same thing. I'm going to track my radar every Saturday. I want to go out and see if there's a progression or a regression. And then that can help us kind of stir into understanding why that happened. And the big question is always why. We look at data, and data should give us an idea of asking that question. I did this today. Why did I do that? And if I can answer that question confidently, then I can start to put together what my maybe long-term changes need to be and my goals, moving forward. So.
Just to jump in here really quick, I had just an application of this whole thing. Had a conversation with an athlete of mine last night who was getting pretty down on himself as far as training, because he's been busted his butt for months now, and he felt like he hasn't gotten much better. And we just pulled up the spreadsheet, Mike, of his velocity over time and his game results, which we're doing live at bats, so we just call them game results, but live at bat results plus his strike zone percentage, which are all the things that we've been working on. And we watched them steadily increase. Now, obviously there's fluctuations, right? But it's steadily increasing. The trend is steadily increasing over time. And it took an athlete from a really anxious state to like, oh, I'm getting better. We're going the course the way we should be, and allowed him just to focus on that instead of worrying, am I getting better, am I not? Because we have all that written down, and we can analyze if you're getting better or if you're not, and we could dial it in a little bit better. So that's just a real case that I wanted to bring up.
Okay. Colin, did you have something?
Yeah, and the technology is in every facility, school. I would challenge that if you're a coach that's looking to get started, go find a relationship with someone that understands it. Like, invest in a service provider rather than the technology, because they're able to get you to step 2 or step 3 a little quicker, and you can see what works. So I would say just seek help, whether it's free content online or just go to a facility and get your guys assessed by someone who understands it a bit more.
Mm-hmm. And sort of building on this idea of that grassroots level, we talk a lot in sports technology about democratizing it, trying to make sure it's reaching everybody. And certainly this has been very prevalent in baseball in the last few years, the minority representation, trying to make sure that we're reaching underserved communities. How can we make sure that these tools are accessible to everyone, and so that everyone has a chance to move forward in their careers? Anyone want to start?
I can start there. I mean, price is going to be a big one, right? Like, find ways to make your products cost as little as possible. If not having like a free version of it, right? Like, that's going to be huge, and something that we talk about a lot is keeping that cost down. The other thing too, right, I think, is making it so that your technology doesn't come across as like elitist, that you have to be at this level to be able to access this, because until you get to that level, it's not worth it. Like, I think when I come back to what's the most important piece of technology, and I say the spreadsheet there, like, it could literally be, if you have no budget at all, asking a 0 to 10 scale of how fatigued did you feel today to all of your pitchers, right? And being able to use something like that. Like, I think getting into that mindset of write stuff down and how important that can be, that's a really vital first step for anyone at any level in ensuring that you have complete access to it.
Anyone else? Okay.
I'll jump in there on that. Go ahead. So the big thing for me when I started our company back in 2017 and I did it on a college budget. I really had no money, just kind of got going. And what I would say to that, something that Colin brought up is don't be afraid to reach out to people and really people will help. I mean, along the way, I trained at Driveline in 2015 for a couple of weeks, and those guys have been outstanding, and they're aiding in progression to, number one, helping me digest content, understand where the next steps would be with a trusted source. And then two, the people that were around that wanted to see us grow. I think it's important we recognize that, as companies, as tech companies, in many cases, reaching to when kids are reaching to you, or when coaches are reaching to you, it's us. It's us times to connect them with and so I know, all the guys here, we've all been introduced or formally connected in one way or another through our space, but we're all kind of ingesting the same information and producing the same results with players and with coaches in terms of their understanding of the future of where this is going. So I think that's just something that anybody's watching this to be, aware. Don't be afraid to reach out and reach out to even the bigger companies that you would perceive as bigger companies, because you'll be surprised at how well they're or how much they're willing to help in the future.
Mm-hmm. We have another great audience question. Sorry that I missed it from a little while ago about, data ownership. And I know that, at least at the big league level, the CBA kind of defines pretty clearly what those rules are. Obviously, it's a little murkier at the lower levels. How do you maybe start with Nate as an athlete, and then, some of the others from the coaching perspective, how do you gain that comfort level of what data you want to share? How much do you think, how many people do you want to be in your circle as to who you consult with? What are your thoughts, Nate, about how willing you are to share some of this data with the coaches around you?
For the most part, I'm pretty willing. There's not really one data point that I really keep a secret. I don't go out and just start telling people everything. But if a coach or someone has a question about part of my data, and I can able to explain it to them or whatever. But there's not really something I keep secret. I'm obviously a prospect coming up, and the Jays have a lot of data on me just from Rapsodo and everything. And so I really don't keep anything secret. I don't know, someone else here might be able to explain a little more, but as of now, I really haven't kept anything to myself or whatever. I have a bunch of guys helping me out, and they have my data too. So, yeah.
Sure. Would you feel different about a Modus or a heart rate monitor versus a Rapsodo, which is just that's just tracking the ball, whereas some of these other devices are tracking you? Is that a difference in your mind?
Yeah, no, it definitely is a difference, because Modus and using pitcher-centric, you can see movement stuff and how not longevity of your career, but you can see where your mechanics are at. All right, can these mechanics sustain a full year in the minors or a full year or whatever? Can he throw like this? Is his elbow going to hold up? Has he had issues in the past or whatever? They can tie a bunch of things together, and that way it could be not detrimental to the player, but not really giving them the fair shot of actually trying, because they can rule out we don't think he's going to be able to stay healthy the whole year with those mechanics, So in that sense, so those movement patterns you may want to keep to yourself or whatever, depending on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Adding in on this one, I think it really depends who you're talking to. So if you're a guy at a professional level, this is something that we're working on behind the scenes as far as implementing this at Driveline, but analyzing more things. So can we analyze sleep data? Can we analyze change in hormones, things like that? How good can we get at predicting who's going to be elite guys, right? And if you can get really good at predicting who's going to be a big leaguer, you also get really good at predicting who's not going to be a big leaguer. And as an athlete, you would much rather have your performance make the choice of whether you're going to be a big leaguer or not, compared to somebody else making the decision that you are likely not going to be a big leaguer. So it's kind of tough, in my opinion, as far as what to do with the data. So I think it really depends. If you're somebody who doesn't know, should I share this information with this person or not, I would just go use the yardstick of, do I trust them that they have my best interest in mind or not? And if they do, then it's probably totally fine, get their insight. But if you're at all worried that this person may use this, give this data to somebody else or use this to make a decision against you, I would just keep it to yourself. Because I mean, that's where the game is going, and that's where it continues to trend is how can we predict if this guy's going to be good or not? And guys will get and will not get opportunities based on those predictions. So you can also use that to advantage. If you, let's say, for example, like right now, vertical lift is a very hot, very trendy thing. So if you have vertical lift, you want to tell everybody that you've got positive vertical lift, like plus compared to the competition. But if you're more of a sinker guy, maybe you don't want to share that because that's not as trendy now. So I know that's kind of hard. You have to be up to date with the trends to know that stuff. But that's kind of my take on it. If you trust the person, you really think they have your best interest in mind, go for it. If not, I'd keep it to yourself.
We've gonna. It's already been at the 1 hour mark, so we're going to wind down here in the next few minutes. But one question that keeps recurring is, there is another half to this game, position players, and certainly we've got a very pitching-centric panel here. But if anyone has any insights, and Mike kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier with Pitch AI, developing a hitting product. But what other devices and certainly K-motion vests are a big one. But for hitters, what else? What is out there, and what do you see as the future in that space?
Yeah, I know like the K-motion vest has been a great thing that Driveline has used when they're doing hitting assessments. We're trying to work towards the markerless space on doing that. So that is something we're actively working on. And I know I've got our senior biomechanist sending us, hitting videos every day now. And some of our big focus moving forward is in the hitting side of things. When we first released Pitch AI, our throwing was very much focused on, you need to have a leg kick, you need to be moving down a mound, and you need to be doing a traditional pitching motion for it to work. Since then, we've been trying to get into like long toss, making sure that everything works for that. So you can really evaluate any type of arm action and from any type of throw. So that has been something we've been working towards as well. So you should be able to evaluate, position players throwing. We've done some really fun stuff with a couple catching coaches online. So that's been fun working on like catcher throwing motions. Some of the pros that we have worked with, they want to look at like position player throwing mechanics too. So that is all stuff that we can do in current state, but future state a little bit more on the hitting side.
Mm-hmm. Great. Dean, yeah.
Yeah, I have a little bit of experience training hitters, not a whole lot. I know the guys at Driveline, I'll get a Slack DM telling me to stay in my lane, which is fine. But some of the stuff we've done, collecting data with hitters, be like on blast metrics to get swing speed as well as swing path. You could use like a reps out of hitting unit as well. We've done a lot of how fast are they swinging compared to what is the exit velocity to kind of determine quality of contact. You can take it a step further. Let's say you've got a pitching Rapsodo with a hitting Rapsodo with a blast. You can then determine what pitches each hitter hits best, and then what pitches they hit least and like the worst, and then you can design practice around that. So it's pretty much the same idea as far as measuring and then using that to determine what is the athlete good at, what are they bad at, how do we structure training around that to make them better. Same type stuff, just the differences are just going to be the names of the technologies and exactly what they do, but really the process is the same.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. We'll go around the horn one last time here. Anyone has any final thoughts, anything that kind of came up and you weren't able to edge your way into this crowded field of panelists? If you have any final thoughts here, maybe start with you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great to learn a lot on this from all of you. My final thing is, as we talk about data and all where the game is going, I think there's always ebbs and flows, and just in our space, in the scouting space, just with how MLB is democratizing data, we definitely see it heading back to its roots, where whether it's the vendor or the company making it more accessible, or a PBR, some of our fellow scouting companies making data just widely available, the human element is always going to be important. And I see data and video and access to it just being a very big impetus of getting back to the human element of this. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I actually sort of remiss that we didn't get a chance to talk about the MLB Draft League, but that's going to be another great involvement for coming forward. Nate, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, I think I would just like to reiterate, I think Cullen said it, but like if you're a coach or a player, like you really don't know much about any of this stuff or anything, like ask questions, reach out to someone. Like for me, when I was learning it at junior college, I was asking my pitching coach at the time, Zach Bove. He's now with the Twins in player development. But then when I got into pro ball and I met Casey, like I started asking him so many questions, and it's just like I just became a sponge of all these different ideas. And when I went out to Driveline, I learned a bunch out there that really helped me up to have a successful 2019. And also asking Mike a bunch of questions on biomechanics, just learning more and more about everything. Just never stop asking questions. If you're unsure about something, don't leave any stone unturned. Like ask that question, try to figure it out, but that's all I got. It was fun on here. Guys, appreciate it.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, just echoing everybody else's comments there. When I first started writing about baseball, my training's in ergonomics, which is, quite a bit different than sport. But the people who were the most impactful on me very early on were like Eno Saris, Kyle Bodie, Josh Howsam from BP Toronto, and it was just because I asked them questions and they had no problem answering them. So ask questions, as much as, there's some big downsides to social media. One of the most positives about it is that you can have unfettered access to people to ask them questions. So, don't hesitate.
All right, we'll go Dean, and then Casey will bring us home.
Yeah, well, first off, good to see all you guys again and connect. I'm a sucker for a well-designed and well-informed question with all the free information. So I get those every once in a while, and I love answering them no matter how long they are. And I'm sure you guys are all the same. Obviously, the questions where somebody hasn't done much research, not as fun, but the ones where you can tell they've freaking gone through all the free resources, I love those. So just want to echo, if just start learning, whatever's free, start learning there, start writing down questions you have. And if you're reading some blog or some article or watching some video and you have some sort of question from that, just hit up the person who made it. They would they obviously love the topic because they made the video or the content on it. And you're going to get some pretty good responses, in my opinion.
Casey?
Yeah, so shameless plug, talk about free content. We actually today just released our Connect series, which is an online educational platform for free on our website. So, that kind of stuff. There's so much to that out today. We just felt stuff, talk about Pro Play AI and our bands and Modus and all these different things, bring it on one platform and kind of push it out there. But, look, my email, I get, emails from coaches all around the world every day. And it's one of those things where we're all connected now. We all have this ability to reach to one another and support one another. And it's for the greater good of the athlete. And so anytime a coach has questions, wants deeper, we want to turn you to resources that make sense for you. And like Dean said, I kind of want you to do homework beforehand to ask an educated question, because those are the best questions. But no question's a bad question. We can get you started somewhere and push you in the right directions to make sure that, look, we all started somewhere and we all know what it feels like to just, start breaking the ice to get where we want to go. And we want to make sure we help you get there as well. So.
To name drop you for a sec, one of the things that always stuck with me is I had a conversation with Jim Cott a number of years ago, and he talked about how Whitey Ford taught him his sinker, and he talked about how, like, even though they were opponents, in a game, there was always the idea of the pitchers union. Like, there's this camaraderie and fraternity of like, hey, we're all in this together. And so even before a game, Whitey Ford was out there showing Jim like a slightly different, placement of the fingers. And I definitely see that, on this panel and throughout the baseball community. We're all kind of, attacking the same problems. So a few housekeeping notes. I know there were a lot of very good questions, some of which were very specific for one panelist. So if anyone wants to email stlive@sporttechie.com, I will try to forward that along to the relevant party and see if we can try to get you an answer. And if this is your first time visiting SportTechie, I know this is a very baseball-centric audience that may not have seen a lot of the rest of our content. Feel free to check out our daily newsletter, and we do have these events pretty much every week on a wide range of topics. Next week's actually about facial recognition at stadiums, and so we're really covering all of our bases here. But most importantly, thanks to Cullen, Casey, Dean, Mike, and Nate. Thanks all for joining us. A virtual round of applause to you, and look forward to chatting more down the road.